Once upon a time, in a small village between the green hills, there lived a man named Daniel. He was a kind man, always helping others, always smiling. But there was one strange thing about him sometimes. People saw him into places at the same time. One day, an old woman from the village ran to Daniel's house, breathing heavily. "Daniel, thank you for helping me carry the heavy basket today," she said. Daniel looked surprised. "But I was at the river all day, helping the fishermen," he said. The old woman frowned. "No, I saw you. You were with me. You even told me a joke, and we laughed." Daniel's heart started beating fast. This was not the first time someone said this. People often told him they saw him somewhere when he was somewhere else. Was there another Daniel? A man who looked just like him? Days passed, and more people spoke about this. Some said they saw him helping an injured dog. Others said he was in the market buying apples, while at the same time, he was fixing a roof. Daniel felt confused. "How can this be?" he whispered to himself. One night, he decided to find the truth. He walked through the dark village streets, looking for answers. Then, near the big tree at the center of the village, he saw a shadow, a man standing there, looking just like him. His heart jumped. "Who are you?" Daniel asked, stepping closer. The man smiled, and his face looked just like Daniel's. "I am you," the man said softly. Daniel felt cold air around him. "That's impossible. I am me." The man nodded. "Yes, and I am also you. I do all the things your heart wants to do but sometimes cannot. I help when you are busy. I laugh when you feel sad. I am your kindness, your love, your hope." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He remembered moments when he wanted to help someone but had no time. Times when he wanted to smile but felt tired. Times when he wanted to do more but couldn't. "So, you are my heart." The man nodded again. "Yes, and I will always be here. As long as you keep kindness in your heart, as long as you believe in love, I will be here." Daniel felt warmth inside him. He understood now. His kindness had created something magical, something beyond reality. He wiped his tears and smiled. "Thank you." The man smiled back. "Keep going, Daniel. Keep being you." And then, just like that, he disappeared into the night. From that day, Daniel never felt alone. He knew that every time he helped, every time he loved, every time he gave, he was not just one man, he was a heart big enough to be two. So, my dear friends, always choose kindness. Even when life is hard, even when things go wrong, remember, your heart is powerful. It can touch lives in ways you never imagine. If you liked this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support helps bring more heartwarming and magical stories to you. Thank you for listening. Stay kind, stay strong, and remember you are never alone. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel felt something new inside him: peace. He no longer questioned the strange things people said about him. Instead, he focused on being the best version of himself. One morning, as he walked through the village, he saw a little boy crying near the bakery. Daniel knelt beside him. "What's wrong, little one?" The boy wiped his tears. "I lost my money. My mother gave it to me to buy bread, but I dropped it, and now I can't find it." Daniel smiled gently. "Come with me." He took the boy's small hand and led him into the bakery. "One loaf of bread, please." The baker, a grumpy man with a big mustache, frowned. "Is he paying?" Daniel placed a coin on the counter. "I am." The boy's face lit up. But I don't have to pay you back." Daniel shook his head. "One day, when you see someone else in trouble, help them. That will be my payment." The boy nodded, holding the warm bread close to his chest. "I promise," he said, running home happily. As Daniel turned to leave, the baker called out, "You are a good man, Daniel." Daniel chuckled. "I'm just doing what my heart tells me." That night, as he walked back home under the silver moon, he felt a presence beside him. He didn't need to turn his head. He knew. "You were there, weren't you?" Daniel whispered. A soft voice replied, "I always am." Daniel smiled. "Did I do the right thing?" The voice was warm like a hug. "You did more than the right thing. You planted a seed in that boy's heart. One day, he will help another, and another, and another. That is how kindness grows." Daniel breathed in the cool night air. His heart felt full. Years passed. Daniel grew older, but his kindness never faded. The villagers loved him, and his name was spoken with respect and warmth. One day, as he sat outside his small house, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, a young man approached. "Daniel," the young man said, his voice familiar. Daniel looked up. The boy from the bakery, now a grown man, stood before him. His eyes were bright with kindness. "I never forgot," the young man said. "That day, you told me to help others. I did, and I taught my children to do the same." Daniel felt tears in his eyes. He reached out, placing a hand on the young man's shoulder. "That is all I ever wanted." The young man smiled. "Thank you, Daniel, for everything." That night, as Daniel lay in bed, he felt a deep peace settle in his heart. And in the quiet of the night, he heard the voice once more. "You have lived well, Daniel." Daniel smiled in the darkness, "Because I was never alone." The wind whispered through the trees outside, carrying the echoes of kindness, love, and an unseen presence that would always remain. And so, the story of Daniel the Double Man lived on, not in books, but in hearts. Remember, my dear friends, kindness never dies. It grows. It spreads. It touches lives in ways we cannot see. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe. Your support helps bring more beautiful stories to life. Keep spreading love, keep believing in goodness, and always remember you are never truly alone. Many years passed, and the village changed. New houses were built, children grew up, and the streets became busier. But one thing never changed: the story of Daniel, the double man. People still spoke of him. Parents told their children, "If you ever feel alone, remember Daniel. He was never really alone because kindness was always with him." One cold winter evening, a little girl sat outside her house, crying softly. Her hands were red from the cold, and she had no coat. An old man, wrapped in a thick shawl, walked past and saw her. "Why are you crying, child?" he asked. She sniffled. "I lost my scarf. It was my mother's, and now it's gone." The old man, with wrinkles deep as rivers and eyes full of wisdom, took off his shawl and wrapped it around her. "This will keep you warm," he said gently. The girl looked up, surprised. "But this is yours." The old man smiled. "It was given to me by someone long ago. He told me that kindness should never stop. Now, I give it to you." The girl held the shawl close, feeling warmth not just from the cloth but from the kindness within it. She asked, "Who gave it to you?" The old man chuckled. "A man named Daniel, a man who was never alone because his kindness lived in others." The girl's eyes widened. "Daniel, the double man," the old man nodded. "Yes. And do you know what he would say if he were here?" The girl shook her head. "He would say, 'When you see someone in need, help them. When you have love in your heart, share it. And when you feel alone, remember you are never truly alone.'" The girl smiled through her tears and hugged the shawl tightly. "I will remember." The old man patted her head gently and walked away, disappearing into the snowy streets. That night, as the little girl lay in bed, she felt something strange, something warm and invisible. It was as if someone was there, watching over her. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Daniel." And far away, in the whispers of the wind, in the glow of the moon, in the kindness of hearts, a soft voice replied, "I am always here." My dear friends, remember this. Every act of kindness lives on. It touches one heart, then another, and another, until the whole world is filled with love. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe. Let's keep the spirit of kindness alive, one story at a time. Thank you for listening, and remember you are never alone. Many, many years passed, and Daniel became a legend in the village. His name was spoken with love, his kindness remembered in stories, and his spirit lived in the hearts of those who believed in goodness. But time moved forward, and the world outside the village changed. The roads became wider, the houses taller, and new people came to live there. Soon, fewer people spoke of Daniel, and the old story started to fade like footprints in the sand. One day, a young boy named Leo, who had just moved to the village, sat by the river, skipping stones across the water. He was new, lonely, and felt like he didn't belong. His family had come from the city, and everything here felt different, quieter, older, and full of stories he didn't understand. When an old woman, with silver hair and warm eyes, sat beside him. She watched him for a moment before speaking. "You are new here." Leo nodded, not looking up. "Yeah." The old woman smiled. "This river has seen many things. It has heard laughter, carried wishes, and even held secrets." Leo finally looked at her, curious. "Secrets?" She nodded. "A long time ago, there was a man named Daniel. People called him the Double Man." Leo frowned. "That sounds strange. Why double?" She chuckled. "Because people used to see him into places at once. He was always helping someone, always sharing kindness. But do you know the real secret?" Leo shook his head. "The truth is, Daniel wasn't really into places at once. His kindness was so powerful that it lived in others. He helped one person, and that person helped another, and another, until kindness was everywhere." Leo was quiet for a moment. He picked up a small stone and rolled it between his fingers. "But he's gone now, right? Just a story." The old woman leaned closer. "Is he?" She pointed at the river. "Look." Leo watched as he dropped the small stone into the water. It made a tiny splash. Then ripples spread out in circles, growing bigger and bigger. The old woman smiled. "That is how kindness works. One small act spreads and touches many. Daniel may not be here, but his kindness never stopped. It's still moving, just like the ripples in the water." Leo watched the ripples grow, his heart feeling something new, something warm. The old woman stood up. "Remember, young one, even a small kindness can change the world. Maybe, just maybe, you can be the next Daniel." Leo looked up, but the old woman had already started walking away. The wind blew gently through the trees, carrying whispers of something old, something magical. That night, Leo lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. He thought about Daniel, about the ripples in the river, about kindness. Then, he made a decision. The next morning, as he walked to school, he saw a little girl struggling to carry her heavy school bag. Without thinking, he ran to help her. She looked up, surprised. "Why are you helping me?" Leo smiled. "Because kindness never stops." And somewhere, in the wind, in the rustling leaves, in the light of the morning sun, a voice whispered, "Well done, my dear friends. Kindness never fades. It moves through time, through people, through small acts that change the world." If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe. Let's keep kindness alive. Let's keep the ripples going. and let's remind the world we are never alone. Years passed, and Leo never forgot the story of Daniel. It stayed in his heart like a small flame, always reminding him to be kind, to help, and to spread goodness wherever he went. He grew up in the village, making friends, learning from the elders, and sharing Daniel's story with anyone who would listen. He helped people in small ways, carrying bags for the elderly, sharing his lunch with a hungry classmate, or simply smiling at those who looked sad. One day, when Leo was a young man, he decided to leave the village and see the world beyond the hills. He wanted to learn, to grow, and to share Daniel's kindness with people outside his home. With a small bag and a heart full of hope, he set off on his journey in a busy city, where people rushed past each other without looking. Leo saw a man sitting on the cold pavement, shivering. Many people walked by, too busy to notice. Leo stopped, took off his scarf, and wrapped it around the man's shoulders. The man looked up, eyes wide with surprise. "Why did you do that?" Leo smiled. "Because kindness never stops." The man's eyes filled with tears. "No one has spoken to me all day. Thank you." Leo nodded and walked on, feeling the warmth in his heart grow stronger. Days turned into weeks, and wherever he went, he carried Daniel's story with him. He helped a lost child find his mother, shared food with a stranger, and listened to people who had no one else to talk to. One evening, in another town, he sat in a small cafe, drinking tea, when he overheard two people talking at the next table. "I don't understand it," one man said. "People say kindness is rare, but lately, everywhere I go, someone helps me, someone shares a smile, offers a hand." The other man nodded. "Yes, me too. It's strange, but it feels like kindness is spreading." Leo listened, smiling to himself. He had not done anything grand or heroic. He had simply done what his heart told him, just like Daniel had. And now, the ripples were spreading. He traveled for many years, and everywhere he went, he saw kindness growing. He met people who told stories of a man who once lived in a small village, a man who was seen into places at once, a man whose kindness never faded. One day, after many years, Leo felt a longing in his heart. He had seen the world, shared Daniel's story, and spread kindness. Now, it was time to return home. When he reached the village, it had changed. The roads were smoother, the houses were newer, and there were many new faces. But one thing remained, the same: the river, the hills, and the warmth of the people. As he walked through the village, he saw a group of children sitting under a tree, listening to an old woman. His heart skipped a beat. It was the same old woman who had told him Daniel's story all those years ago. She looked up and smiled. "Leo," she said warmly, "welcome home." Leo sat down with the children, listening as she told the story of Daniel once more. The children's eyes were wide with wonder. their hearts open to the magic of kindness. When she finished, a little boy raised his hand. "Do you think Daniel is still here?" The old woman looked at Leo, her eyes twinkling. "Oh yes, my dear, he is still here. In every act of kindness, in every heart that chooses love, in every small moment of goodness." Leo smiled and reached into his bag. He pulled out a small stone, the same kind he had once thrown into the river as a boy. He placed it in the little boy's hand. "Throw it into the river," he said. The boy ran to the water's edge and tossed the stone in. They all watched as the ripples spread, growing bigger and bigger. Leo turned to the children and said, "That is how kindness works. One small act spreads and touches many. It never stops." And in that moment, as the wind rustled through the trees and the river whispered its secrets, Leo felt something unseen, something powerful. He did not need to turn his head. He already knew. A voice, soft and familiar, whispered in the wind, "Well done, Leo." And he smiled. "My dear friends, kindness never fades. It moves through time, through people, through small acts that change the world. Keep it alive. Keep it growing. And remember, you are never truly alone." Years passed, and Leo grew older. His hair turned silver, and wrinkles lined his face. But his heart remained as warm as ever. He became known as the storyteller of the village, the man who carried Daniel's kindness forward. People came from far and wide to hear him speak, and children sat around him, their eyes shining with wonder. One evening, as the golden sun dipped behind the hills, Leo sat by the river, watching the water flow gently. He felt at peace. He had lived a life filled with love, with kindness, with meaning. As he gazed at the ripples dancing on the surface, he heard soft footsteps behind him. "Leo," a voice said. He turned and saw a young woman standing there. Her face was familiar, though he couldn't quite place it. "You don't remember me, do you?" she asked, smiling. Leo studied her face, then shook his head gently. She sat beside him and pulled something out of her bag, a scarf. An old, worn scarf that looked strangely familiar. "You gave this to me when I was a little girl," she said. "I had lost my mother's scarf, and you gave me yours. You told me that kindness never stops." Leo's heart swelled with emotion. He remembered now the small, tearful girl who had sat in the cold so many years ago. She continued, her voice filled with warmth. "I never forgot that moment. I kept this scarf all these years, not just to remember you, but to remind myself to be kind. And because of you, I've helped others, just as you helped me." Leo felt a lump in his throat. He reached out and touched the scarf gently. "I am so proud of you," he whispered. The young woman smiled, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, smooth stone. She held it up. "Do you remember this?" Leo's eyes widened. It was the same kind of stone he had given to the little boy all those years ago. the one he had asked to throw into the river. That boy was my younger brother, she said softly. He kept the stone, and he always told me, one small act spreads and touches many. Leo's eyes filled with tears. The ripples had continued. The kindness had lived on. The young woman looked at him with deep gratitude. Leo, you were never just telling Daniel's story. You were living it. Leo smiled, wiping his eyes. He looked out at the river, the sky painted in soft pinks and purples. He felt something in the wind, something familiar, something unseen. And in that quiet, peaceful moment, he knew Daniel's story would never end. It would live in the hearts of those who carried kindness forward. In the whispers of the wind, in the ripples on the water, Leo took a deep breath and closed his eyes, feeling a deep, endless love surrounding him, and in the rustling of the trees, in the gentle flowing of the river, he heard the softest, most beautiful whisper, "Well done, my friend." Leo smiled, and the ripples continued, "My dear friends, this story does not end here. It lives in you. It lives in every act of kindness, every smile, every moment of love you share with the world." If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe. Let's keep the spirit of kindness alive. Let's be the ripples that never stop. And always remember you are never truly alone.